Okay, guys, so you're welcome back. We continue on the research methods in psychology, Sci 101. So we have discussed naturalistic observation, we talked about case study and survey method. So today we continue with other methods in research methods in psychology. So we have the correlational studies, the experimental method, and the quasi-experiment, or call it the quasi, QUASI. So the experimental method. The experimental method utilizes artificial environment. Yes, it is conducted in laboratories. Yes, so in this method, we define it as a method that involves the manipulation of an independent variable, or some will tell you the manipulation of an environment and the measurement of its outcome under a controlled condition. Yes. On the other way around, you can say experimental research design or research method involves the manipulation of an independent variable while measuring the outcome on a dependent variable, and then holding extraneous variables constant. You understand that we're having independent variable, dependent, and extraneous variables, which these are the major ones. Yes, so the independent is the one we manipulate. We also call it the researcher's variable. That is the one that is manipulated in the environment. The dependent is where we measure the effect of the manipulation. And extraneous variables are the variables that have capacity to affect the outcome of the experiment or the research the way the independent could have affected it. Yes, this explanation will be better in another course. So Sci 121 will take care of that. So like we say, extraneous variable, also known as the unwanted variable, they can confound the whole process. We call it confounding. So that is experimental method. Experimental method, we have two major types, or sometimes three major types. Let me use that word. Between subject design, like designs of experiment, within subject design, and mixed design. For this course, it will not be necessary to go through that until another course, Sci 121. Yeah, so that's experimental method. This one manipulates a lot of things and observe it in the laboratories. Yes, and one advantage that this experimental method have is that it's able to say that this one caused this one. That if you pinch this child will cry. So the pinching is a manipulation of the mood, and the crying is the outcome of that manipulation. So you understand that experimental method have that power to infer causation. Another research design is the the correlational studies or correlational research. Yes, this particular one is able to establish relationships between variables, but not able to infer causation. So we define correlational studies are the kind of study that study the degree and direction of relationships between two or more variables, or between two variables. Yes, so we look at it in that light. We have what we call the correlational coefficient as -1 or +1. Yes, and +1. That is a correlational coefficient. For example, the Pearson correlation R. Yes, so we don't infer causality here. We are not able to establish a causal relationship because we don't really do manipulations to ensure or try to hold other variables constant that may confound the whole process. So here we are only able to establish a correlation or relationships, but not able to say this one caused this one. So in this study, or this correlational study, yes, there are things we need to know. I've said it. It shows degree and direction of relationships. That's what it does. And here we have three major types of correlational study. We have the positive correlation, the negative correlation, and the mixed correlation. Yes, not mixed correlation, zero correlation. Yes, pardon me. So the positive correlation is the type that the direction of relationship flows the same way. Please, let's get it right. They flow the same way. Increase in this, increase in study, increased study lead to increase in academic performance. That is positive correlation. Decrease in study leads to decrease in academic outcome. The same decrease, that is also positive correlation. On the other way around, negative correlation is they go the opposite direction. So increase in exercise leads to decrease in body weight. Yes. So increase again decrease, or decrease in sleep lead to increase in anxiety or body stress or fatigue. I don't know the word, but the key thing I'm trying to point out there is that negative correlations flow in opposite directions. Please expect them in exam hall. You may see them. You might have to see them in exam hall. Then the zero correlation or no correlation, here we are not able to establish a correlation between that particular variables or those variables. Yes. So increasing, for example, sneezing and bank accounts, for example. When you sneeze, it doesn't have any effect on your bank account. I want to use that example to show what we talk about there. So these are the kind of relationships we can establish when we're doing correlational studies. We can be able to establish there is a positive correlation or a negative correlation or no correlation or zero correlation. Yeah, that is in correlational studies. The last we'll talk about it, quasi or quasi experiment, as you want to pronounce it. So quasi experiment, like I spelled it before, QUASI, that is quasi experiment, quasi experiment. So in quasi experiment, the key word there is also experiment. You are hearing the word experiment there, and you understand that in an experiment there is always a manipulation of an environment. Yes, but the word quasi means false. False in this light, meaning that there is meaning that the word quasi means false, or you call it false experiment. False experiment. So there is a manipulation, but in this case now, it is not manipulated by the experimenter. It is manipulated by environment or naturally, like earthquake, like plane crash, like riots. These are not things we experimentally manipulate or cause just so that we can measure some things. No. But once the environment is naturally manipulated, we only take advantage of the situation and collect data for research. But we call it experiment because there is a manipulation, but it is false experiment because it is not necessarily manipulated by the researcher or the experimenter. So that is the remaining part of the research methods as we will be needing to understand for the course Sci 101 and objective exam. So once again, thank you, and please remember to subscribe if you have not, and like our videos and share to your friends. Yes, we are really saddled with the responsibility for maximum performance or outcome, academic outcome. Yes, thank you, and God bless you. See you in the next podcast or video.